will be here. Good. Thank you. Welcome to meeting of all scrutiny committees. It is 1:30. Right. I should open this. Well, could you make sure, like I've just done, that you either switch your phones off or put them on to vibrate? Thank you. And from there, and welcome to anybody who's watching us on that there. Thank you. Well, webcam. We're being webcast this afternoon, I've been informed. Right, item number 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Anybody got any at all, please? Or you feel there's anything that's coming up that you think you should declare, please would you raise it when it comes along? And over to Linda. You got anything to raise at all?
Thank you, Chair. No, I didn't see any obvious interest as I read through the agenda, so thank you.
Thank you. You, as we agreed, may go if you wish. Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda, minutes of previous meetings. I will go through that in the normal manner, go through the pages and anything, agree them if somebody could, and then anything that rises, I'll go through back to agree that. So page number 5, page number 6, page number 7, page number 8, page number 9, page number 10, page number 11, and page number 12. Can somebody agree that was at the meeting, last meeting? Thank you, Renee. Number 2, and Nigel? Thank you. Right, go back through those minutes. If there's anything you think should be raised, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, and page 12. Anybody got any points they want to raise? Your chance to raise them? All seem content. Thank you very much. So on to the next item on the agenda, which is item agenda number 4. I have to look it up. Action sheet on, where are we? Thank you. Page number 13. Want to go through those?
Nothing to add to that, Chair.
Any points on the action sheet anybody wants to raise? Good. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a substantial item on today's agenda, which is the collaboration activity. Who wants to kick it?
Thank you, members. Lyndon will give members a brief introduction to the report via a presentation. Then, following the pre-agenda meeting last week, 2 themes of questioning were identified. Firstly, the effectiveness of the collaboration framework, and the second theme, the impacts and barriers to collaboration. That second theme will focus on the specific collaborations. We've also handed out a shortened down version of the appendix, which focuses on those specific collaborations where funding has ceased or may potentially cease, other collaborations where there are barriers to achieving their outcomes, and any collaborations that are exceeding their goals. So the second appendix you've just received is more focused.
Lyndon, the other thing I would suggest, we'll do that afterwards. Lyndon, where are you? Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. Can you hear me okay? I tend to dip my voice a little bit, so a little nudge will hurt now and again, just to keep me on the straight and narrow if I start to... Whoops. There we go. Just by way of introduction, really, today's report is an update position statement to the report that you received last year from my colleague Mark Sherwood, who wrote the original report for you. As you'd be aware, we've established a collaboration framework that was agreed by Cabinet in March 2014, and this was the framework that we would use for significant collaborations going forward. And part of the, I thought it'd be helpful, just as an aid memoir to members, to have a sort of a very quick background resume of what actually contributes to a significant collaboration framework activity that we would look to take through. And that's around the 5 points there, around the statutory service or activity, what affects a whole service or a significant part of that service, collaborations that have an excess value, whether that's resource, personnel, or other elements in excess of £500,000, whether it affects more than 20 employees, and whether the collaboration would make a significant contribution to corporate performance measures. That was the threshold figures that was placed in the collaboration framework that Cabinet agreed. Just picking up from your activities of last year, you asked for the collaboration framework, that we use that to agree the clear outcomes. That's been agreed with chief officers, that all collaborative activities should be referenced in the relevant service plans, and it's my understanding that they are. A need to separate the activities which are cooperative in nature to those that are collaborative activities. In other words, the activities that we undertake as part of project work rather than collaborative work across the various partnerships we have. We would be supporting relevant stakeholders through the process should it reach the threshold for collaboration. And the guidance and templates are written, but I will hold my hand up. We haven't had the opportunity to get out to all chief officers at the moment to get that embedded, but the message is certainly that all collaboration activity within the threshold would go through the collaboration framework should any activity be taken forward. Just on a brief for this report, you've been provided with an overarching report, really. We've identified each new collaborative activity that we've entered into since April last year up to the end of March this year. Within your pack, you would have had quite a detailed document, and I understand it, and I apologise that it was detailed, but it contains the feedback from the various service areas that we've asked to give us a service update, including any measures, outcomes, performance that's been included within the return on our documents contained within Appendix 1. And I've also identified within the report those areas where this collaboration activity is ceasing and the reason and the rationales behind those. Just as a very brief summary of the activity, and I know you've all had an opportunity to view both the detailed appendix plus the supplementary appendix that came across to you. There were 86 submissions received by me this year. We received 80 last year. There were 7 new submissions, but only one of the submissions started last year. What I'm trying to explain to members with this point is we've only really done one activity of a collaborative nature that took place from the 1st of April last year to the 31st of March this year. I'm not surprised the figure is low, because there is a lot of uncertainty around the Williams map and other issues that have an impact on partnership working across not just the council but other partners, and having an unknown quantity in the room around what's going to happen with future reorganisation, I think has an impact on it. But it was only the one. The other 6 were collaborations that should have been included in last year's report, but was unfortunately not included, and I'm just presuming that was an oversight. And I've named those on there. And we've also amalgamated one of the projects that was in my colleagues in Neighbourhood Services Division, where there was very close duplication to 2 of the collaborations, and they've been amalgamated now under number 33. Just again, really, just to give members a flavour. With the additions, the 6 addition collaborations that's been included in your pack this year, that accounts for about 8%. So it's not a significant increase at all. If you take it to the actual one new one, it's smaller again. There's been 5 projects that have ceased or are ceasing during the year, and they are all to do with funding. There's lots of funding issues, mainly around the issues with the Wales European Funding Office, WEFO funding, and also for service pressures and budget pressures that all service areas across the council have been struggling with over the last year. But there are mitigations to try to salvage at least 3 of those projects that I'm sure my colleagues will embellish on later on. I did an analysis of the, I can't say that word. We did an analysis of the details that's come back, and with any form of analysis, a lot of it is down to interpretation as well. When you look through all the 80+ briefing papers that came back and the details contained wherein, we managed to source out about 57% of the report does benefits to improved service and resource efficiencies, and that can only be a benefit to us as we struggle with an ever-decreasing resource base that we have. 26% of the reported feedback we had leads to an improvement of outcomes for citizens, whether that's service-specific outcome or whether it's a person-specific outcome that has a significant benefit or benefit to a person's well-being and health. Only 7% reported blockages, and that was, as mentioned earlier, really, of the ones that came back, is really down to the discussions around the Williams review and some of the uncertainty that a lot of service areas and local authorities are feeling at this time. There's also 1 or 2 that actually made the point that there's a blockage here, we want to go ahead with it, but we don't really have the resources or the skill set or the resources to get the skill set in to enable us to take some of these collaborations forward. 57% of service areas reported that there were no adverse issues of concern and progress was continuing, and you would have seen that in your pack where it says no adverse impact, no adverse progression to impact there. And finally, 6% within the report reported that there was no immediate benefits, and that was mainly down to commencement and timing, and also service-specific need. Within your pack, just for an example on that one, there's a loaning of tools agreement, but there's been no requirement to loan or even any tools. There's been a provision here, so there's been some movement on some are timing, some are based on need. Just in summary, it's very clear from the feedback that I've had that there's a significant and active collaboration programs that have been going on for quite a significant number of years in some instances, over 10 years with some. We've seen a small increase in the collaborations this year. We've only had 1 new collaboration document that's come through, and as I mentioned to members earlier, that particular project didn't meet the minimum standards to be formulated within a formal collaboration framework that we're pursuing. Again, at the year end, we had 5 projects that were either ceasing or had ceased. Again, linking to funding, and the discussions are continuing. As mentioned earlier, my colleagues will I'm sure, embellish on that. My own thoughts, and this is my own personal thoughts, obviously members will have their own, but with all this collaboration activity going on, we can't do it all on our own as a local authority. It's impossible for us to be able to match the demand against the resources and skill base that we have. So we have to work in partnership, and we work in partnership really well. When you read through some of the documents, some partnerships in excess of 10 years, they obviously working well. The perception would be that collaboration is the positive way forward, and the impact, and members would note within the appendix where I've managed to provide some data and details around what service areas have come back with, what impact, outcomes and results they're achieving there within your report, and some of those have some significant benefits to both individuals, the community, and to service areas. I won't say any more at this point, members, because I'm sure you will have questions to ask around the appendix. So with that, Chair, I'm sure we want to ask questions of the group.
Thank you very much, Lyndon. Right, I'll let you sit back down. A bit I neglected to suggest at the beginning was our officers for today. If you could introduce yourselves and your positions, please. to say that as well.
Sorry, Duncan Smith, Chief Officer, Planning, Public Protection and Neighbourhood Services.
Keith Rutherford, Deputy Chief Officer, Social Care and Housing.
Dominic McChrystal, Head of Education Service.
Karen Padfield, Head of Skills and Employability, and I'm here for Dave Congreve.
Jonathan Hale, Programme Manager involved in ESF project delivery.
And Lyndon Puddy, Head of PSSU.
Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Now it's over to you. And theme 1, and I'm not going to direct you, it's up to you to start asking the questions. This is a new way of doing it. So who wants to fire off first? Norma?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. To what extent has the collaboration framework and the actions proposed by the Cabinet in its report of the 25th of March 2014 been implemented? And is this framework being used when developing potential collaborative activities?
Who's going to answer that one?
Thank you, Councillor Parish. The guidance and templates for the collaboration framework are completed. We didn't have, as I mentioned earlier, we didn't have any of the any new collaborations that would have met the minimum criteria to form part of the collaboration framework that would go through the process that Cabinet agreed, and indeed you saw last year. We've been speaking with our chief officers, and you know, the collaboration framework is there for utilisation. What we haven't done, and particularly within my service area, and that is down to other pressures that's happened during the year, we haven't been out to see all the chief officers to ensure that's embedded, but we kept a watching brief over the number of collaborations that have come through, and we've only had the one. So as to benefit, I can't give you any answers to that at the moment because we haven't actually had any cause to use it.
Any supplementaries? Any officers want to come back on that as well? Thank you. Next question. Who wants to have a go at that? Veronica?
Lyndon, thank you for that. From what you're saying then, am I right or am I wrong in thinking that there's been no impact with the implementation of the collaboration framework, or has in fact that made an impact in the way people are now thinking about working in this way?
It's difficult to answer a question on impact because we haven't been able to use the framework. The framework is there to advise the chief officers and the council, should they wish to be considering a longer term collaborative arrangement, that there is a framework in place that will help us to understand the impact and benefits when that framework is in place. The unfortunate part of it over the last year is that we haven't had anything that we've needed to use that collaboration framework for. I'm sure that when we do use it, we will then be able to see some of the benefits, because it offers a structure for us to be able to, for our chief officers to be able to have conversations in regard to the collaborations they want to undertake, but also allows us then to put into place various systems that will allow us to monitor the impact of that collaboration and be able to report that back through.
So is there the possibility of operating the framework retrospectively, so that, for example, when it comes to the Audit Commission looking again at what's been going on, they can see that that's been applied and whether or not it's having an impact or not on those projects which are still going on?
It could be something that we could apply, but I'm sure the collaboration framework was agreed by Cabinet that it would be used for all future collaborations rather than retrospective collaborations.
Councillor Mulvey?
Yeah, I hesitate to say this, but it seems like the decision of Cabinet of March 14 hasn't actually been implemented in any meaningful way. But I suppose what I want to ask is of chief officers rather than you, Lyndon, is whether the collaborative framework is on your radar and whether you think, if it is a useful tool. I'm looking at you, Dermot.
I think it is a useful tool. I think Lyndon's point, however, about the collaborative framework that we already have in place, if we were to go back now and renegotiate, which is really in effect what we need to do, is go back to partners and say, look, here's our framework, can we look to adopt it? That's obviously something that we haven't understood was a requirement, but we would need to go back then and renegotiate with partners across South East Wales, particularly in the education services. Now, there's nothing to stop us doing that, bearing in mind, however, that the collaborative arrangements we have at the moment are under quite intense scrutiny already through the Recovery Board and through our internal processes. So I suppose it would be, I think there's a decision to be made about what's the impact or what's the value we think that would give us. But clearly it would need to be through negotiation. So I think it's possible, it's just a matter of, is the benefit to us in doing that going to really balance out with the amount of work that's involved in it, and that's something clearly we're happy to look at and take back to partners.
Pam Cameron?
You've kind of moved on to it. What I was going to say is, if this has been passed by Cabinet, is there any particular reason why it's not having more impact?
Obviously, we're almost going to go round in a circle, so I'm going to give you an answer I think Lyndon already has, which is that up to this point, this has been clear. Certainly as Chief Officers, my understanding was this was about any new collaborative services going forward. So we're already embedded within a network of different collaborative ventures with partners. So we would need to just be clear about, are we really being asked today to go back and renegotiate? And if that's the case, then we build it into the work programme and we get on with it and report back.
Can I just quickly say, is there a date? Is it time specific when it should be implemented?
Perhaps I can answer. Yeah, the collaboration framework came in from following the Cabinet decision of last year in 2014.
But Chair, that doesn't really answer Councillor's question. And I think where we're getting stuck here is about people's understanding of what the framework was intended to do and at what point it became live. Clearly, the whole idea of which is coming from councillors at the moment that I'm picking up, so I just want to reflect back and see if I'm right, is that you think this should now apply to every collaborative arrangement we have that meets the criteria that Lyndon's already taken us through, regardless of when that started. If I'm right in understanding that's what members are, I think there is a piece of work for the leadership team to do, to look through and say, well, okay, what's the impact of that going to be? Because that's quite an extensive list of collaborations, which you have in Appendix 1, that we need to look at. And my only cautionary note would be that clearly we can look at it with our framework, but we need to engage in a discussion with all our partners. So I think it's a really helpful clarification, if that is the case, Chair, that's what members are thinking we really now should be doing.
Councillor Curran?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure I've got my head around this, but as far as I can understand it, what you're saying is you set up a framework last year, but you've never used it because there's been no new collaborations. Is there a reason why there's been no new collaborations? Is this, we seem to have been collaborating for years on a variety of things, and now all of a sudden we've gone this almost a year where we've done no collaboration at all?
Really, I can only refer back to what my own suspicions are around that. We've did an exercise with all the chief officers on the performance that came back last year against the performance that we've got this year. There was only one new one there. I'm second guessing what the rationale and reason behind it is that people are very nervous around the prospect of what's happening from reorganisation point of view. But that's just my own personal perspective. I've got no evidence to suggest that there's other activity that's going on that's not included within the collaboration briefs that's been returned. The reality is we've only had one in the last year.
Can I just come in there for a moment? I've been doing a considerable piece of work around training for social care with training departments across the former Gwent authorities, and we've gone so far with it, but there is a real nervousness about going into the real detail because of what may happen in local government reorganisation. People feel if they put an awful lot of effort in and then they're not matched to that authority, then the work will be wasted. Now, we've gone so far with it, and we're going to go ahead now with Newport, Monmouth and Torvine and continue to do that piece of work, mindful of this framework. And we did also the same piece of work, or a similar piece of work, with the complaints for social care. And again, after a lot of detailed work, 3 of the authorities walked away and said, we don't want to do this now at this point because we don't know what the future brings. So I think there is it's not that officers are not looking for, I mean, in the training one, there was obviously efficiencies to be made. And that's why we'll look, but, you know, if you can't get the partners to the table to talk about it, you can't collaborate. So it's not that we're not trying to do it, councillors.
Thank you there. Councillor Powell? Oh, sorry. Say so, Karen. Sorry.
I just was going to add to that some of the collaborations that we've been involved with are obviously led by the fact that there is funding available. So they were all set up historically, the ESF projects, before this. And over the last couple of years, it's been a case of constantly, I mean, some members will be aware, some staff have had, 4 at risk of redundancy notices because funding is coming to an end, and then you get a few extra months funding. So that cycle of, oh, we're going to get an extension, are we going to get an extension, then doesn't lead to a situation where you're going to take on a new framework, because actually in the mix of things you're just trying to, okay, are we going to get the funding? We've got the potential for new ESF projects, but at the moment there is just that potential. We have no promises. There are lots of people working very hard around that. And I think, yes, we will be looking at the framework at the point at which we are making sure that one of the things that, again, members will be very familiar with in lots of cases, there are many hoops that people have to jump through when you get European funding. And so I think the framework is part and parcel of what we will be using to actually collaborate, because when we're collaborating across several local authorities, but also across FE colleges, the FE sector, with then significant procurement in the voluntary sector. So there are many sort of structural frameworks involved in all of that. And I think, to echo what Dermot has said, we can use an additional framework, but again, we have to respect, obviously, that other local authorities may or may not have something similar or different. But certainly the principles and the ethos behind the framework are something that are in the minds of us going forward. But unfortunately, at the moment, we're in that situation again where actually the primary focus is on, are we able to keep services going? This council members have underwritten some staff to try and keep core things going while we are waiting to hopefully get proposals to WEFO coming through.
Can I just come back with one quickie on that, because it follows on, just to say, so it isn't the opinion of the officers here that the framework is causing the problem, it is something else.
Jess?
Thanks, Chair. I think the base issue around a lot of these questions is regular renegotiation built into your monitoring of the various collaborations? And if it isn't, do you think there's space for the framework to be used, I don't know, annually, biannually, whatever? Or do you feel that, it's better for the life of a project to continue and then only look at it again, in terms of renegotiation rather than just monitoring at the end?
I think there's probably going to be a range of answers to that, because the nature of the services we're talking about, some are project-based and some are actually long-standing services that deliver. In education's case, for example, the hearing impairment service is something that's been going for decades. So while we have an annual evaluation, and that comes back to a steering group of lead officers, and I know it's something that we need to also get back. We need to get back to a position where there's a report back to the exec members every year, because that for whatever reason, seems to have slipped over the last number of years. We wouldn't be going back to renegotiate, if you like, the whole framework. Whereas other more specific services where we might be doing, and I'm going to look to other colleagues because it may be more applicable elsewhere, it may have a lifespan to it of 2 or 3 years. That may be possible. So I think it's going to be contingent on the nature of that service. But there's always a way in for local authorities. If we're not happy with the quality or the quantity of the services that we're getting, or the relevance of them, clearly I can't imagine that that any of the services here wouldn't have a framework in which we can, or have a methodology with which we can go back and question that and have some change. So I don't know.
Right. Mainly a question, I think, for Lyndon. And it's this really, at the corporate centre, have we thought about seeking the views of other local authorities in our region, or other potential partners or actual partners, have we thought about asking them to collaborate on our collaborative framework? Can we have a collaborative framework which all partners, all local authorities anyway, perhaps, would be comfortable with? Because that's the only way in which we're going to enable chief officers, when they do have reason to review the existing partnership arrangements they've got or put forward a new one, they've first got to get through the step or the hurdle of actually finding out or discovering what sort of collaborative approach the other authority has got. And if you're trying to meld two frameworks which aren't easily reconcilable, then you're stuck at point one, aren't you, really? And I just wonder whether there's a corporate thing for us to do in relation to the corporate centres of other potential partners.
It's a very good question. We haven't had those discussions as a short and accurate answer. Originally, the framework was around to sort of guide the council into its thinking around whether it should be entering into a collaborative approach or not. But it would be something that I can certainly take forward for that. We haven't had those discussions wider than within our own body here.
Can I just come back? I think it'd be useful to put that proposition in front of the people you need to within your own department, obviously, including the Chief Exec, but also perhaps the Cabinet itself. Perhaps the Cabinet was anticipating that would happen with our potential partners. So.
Alan Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding Brian's point that he's just made, given the issues that we have around future funding and the current issue with grants that are detailed in the paper, and given the problems in relation to the Williams Commission, am I probably right in saying that there's going to be collaboration in Ayrshire for the next 4 years? And what cost will that be to us?
Again, just speaking from the education viewpoint, we're actively looking at a number of potential collaborations at the moment, because I think most people will recognise that whatever the timescale is going to be over whatever the model is going to look like eventually, children are in schools now. We've got customers who need support and services now, so we can't wait for several years to try and figure out what that might look like. We still have to make sure that we're mindful of citizens now and the services they need. So certainly within education, we're looking at a range of potential collaborations across South East Wales and potentially even further afield. So issues around how we can support how special schools can support services beyond their own estate and collaborate across local authorities, for instance, is something that several authorities are looking at. And if we can bring those to the table, we'll certainly use the framework, but we're not waiting for something to happen down the road. That's not to say that in some instances, I'm sure some people are a bit cautious then because of the nature of the work that they might be involved in. Certainly from education's viewpoint, and I think from many services' viewpoint, we're still looking for opportunities as we're heading into budget build the year ahead, and officers, chief officers, and everyone's conscious of the pressures that we're all going to face.
If I could...
Could I just come back quickly on that one? I think it's possibly easier in relation to education because VS and the way it's structured now, and I'd like to hear from others about how they see it in their particular spheres.
In relation to seeking European funding, I'm not experiencing with other local authorities or FE sector that there's an inertia on collaboration. I think the issues that we're facing is more that the European programme was a year late in being approved. It's the 2014-20 programme, but actually approval didn't happen until January of this year. And then the building of business plans that satisfy WEFO's requirements is mainly the hurdles that we're going through. There's a lot of willingness across the region, both, as I say, within the local authority sector and the FE sector, to put a lot of work into it. So I'm not experiencing inertia in that respect. I think where we are is making sure that we're having to jump through all the hoops that are necessary to satisfy the particular funding source.
Well, certainly from neighbourhood services and planning and public protection point of view, the peer review of neighbourhood services made it very clear that regardless of local government reorganisation, we should be looking to collaborate with others. So there's not an inertia, there certainly won't be inertia from me in terms of collaboration, but I think you've got to understand that to collaborate you've got to have partners, and where there is a level of uncertainty that becomes more difficult. So I don't think it leads to inertia. I think it adds an extra layer of difficulty to negotiate a collaboration under these circumstances.
Thank you, Duncan. Veronica.
Coming back again to what Brian was saying earlier, and I think we've all been sort of trying to understand, and that is, if you have a jointly agreed collaborative framework, which presumably, certainly the way I read your paper, it was partly driven by the Audit Commission, the need for it. If that's agreed by them and by the other local authorities with whom you're going to collaborate, is that going to make it easier as a structure for you to move forward? Or is it actually making difficulties? Because that's not what we're clear about at the moment. We were under the impression that this was obviously driven by the Cabinet and needed to be done, but I can't see that Torvine would be alone in feeling that. So where are we going from here now?
Who wants that one? Thank you, Lyndon.
Thank you for that. When the collaboration framework went to Cabinet, that was identified as a tool that was required to help the Council come to its own decision-making around whether it was pertinent or proper for it to enter into some collaborative arrangements with whomever that would be. There was nothing wrong in me exploring with other parts of the Gwent region, say for instance, in trying to ascertain whether they have a collaboration framework, and I can make some inquiries into understanding how their collaboration framework works and to ours to see whether there are any synergies there that we can use for the future. But if I could just take us back a little bit, the decision around the collaborative framework was to give the Council some confidence in, when it enters into future collaborative arrangements, that those arrangements are going to be secure, that the Council is not going to be put at any, or it mitigates some elements of the risk. But I do take your point and Councillor Moby's point of the fact that we could use this on a more regional basis rather than just for our own tools. Personally, I think it's a very helpful tool for the Council to make its decisions on whether it's going to enter into a collaboration arrangement or not. Thinking back to one of those criteria on the screen here, which was projects in excess of £500,000, whether that's a significant amount of resource that other authorities will be thinking around as well. But to safeguard the Council, the collaboration framework was in place there to give us some confidence that the decision-making that we are making, both at leadership team and also as a Council, gives us those confidences that we enter into the arrangement knowing that we are going to get a benefit from it. But I do take your point on the regional aspect, and I will be taking that forward.
Okay. Nigel?
Yes, just getting back to the point you made earlier about, which I would say, I think there was a large intake of breath when it was said that we're only thinking of this in terms of future, of future projects and not the ongoing projects. Because I've gone back to the original Cabinet paper of 25th of March 2014 and the key messages, 3.1. I suppose you could argue that the first one, about the first key message, presently there is not a consistent approach to ensuring anticipated cost, benefits and accountability arrangements are part of the formative decision-making process. You could say that that's about the future, but I would say that the second point, that no favourable system for corporate monitoring of the compliance, performance and or expected outcomes of significant collaborative project services is in place, that appears to me to be about the projects that are happening now and how we keep in and how we go through the things now, about how it's working now, about how the projects that are on now, and are they delivering what we expected to do now. That's my, it just, as I said, I think I was particularly, shocked to hear that it was only concerning with future projects and not present projects.
Doesn't the Cabinet paper talk about the collaboration going forward, framework going forward? I'm trying to think back over a year now, so I probably may have it slightly wrong.
To seek approval to put in place a collaboration framework used to help to ensure there's a clear rationale for entering into collaboration with and to monitor the expected benefits being achieved, maybe, but still, I think for some of us we're still working on the basis that this is a good thing for the particularly under the second of the key messages, that would be something to do with not just good practice for the future, but good practice for the present, based on what is about the projects that are happening now. I think that's still my feeling about it, and I think that's a general feeling about.
I think Dermot said it earlier. We evaluate. You've got a whole list of projects that we're involved in there, and there are methodologies for evaluating those as we go along. So I think it's happening maybe by default. And not in a systematic way. But, as you can see from the list, certainly from my department and others which I've read, there is comments on the end about what's going on, if there are problems and what have you. So there is a monitoring system in place. We are monitoring. And you're frightening me a little bit in terms of having to go back and potentially renegotiate in terms of the framework. That's a huge piece of work, and I don't think our partners would be too terribly happy if things are going along in a way that we consider to be acceptable. So, I
think it was still that thing about the second of the key message about the fact that they're saying no formal system of monitoring.
Yeah, that's what
which I would assume is when they're looking at past and present projects.
I think there is a systematic internal mechanism within the department, and that's evidenced by what you've got.
Indeed, but
if you're talking about systematic across council, perhaps not, and that perhaps is something that we need to do. But I think the thought of renegotiating on the basis of our collaboration agreement, that I don't know about you guys, but that gives me a little bit of a worry.
Karen, you wanted?
I just really wanted to come in on the point that on the European funded elements, the funding comes with very, very close quarterly monitoring back to WEFO. The monitoring of the projects then is fed through the various WorkSmart team plan systems, so the chief officers can be assured that not only are we meeting what the council wanted to achieve through, if you like, chasing that money, that actually our funder knows that we are achieving the targets that they set for us and that were agreed, if you look, by the evidence of population need, because that's where all of that is based. At each point of review with the funder, there is a performance management report. If variation is too great, you're required to reprofile. If you're under target, that means you reprofile down, so less money comes so that it can be used elsewhere in Wales. We've been very successful, within the region and within Torfaen, that actually, as I think I mentioned before, we've had projects for a certain lifetime, then we've had extensions, and we've had extensions on the back of either very efficient working, meaning we've used up less money, but still achieved great outcomes, so we've been allowed to extend the use of the money, or we've been seen as a high-performing project, and therefore we've been given more money to carry on. So that certainly is fed through the systems, and I suspect there are other examples like that, but I would echo Douglas, if it's bringing existing data together in one place that is helpful, that's one thing. To try and go back and apply a framework back certainly within Wales European Funding Office would be pretty difficult. But I would, just to assure you on the monitoring side of it, I think that's in place on lots of things.
I'd like to ask a question from the chair, actually. On the corporate collaborative framework diagram in the collaboration framework, we've got a diagram here, and on the bottom end of it, implementation and monitoring stage, there's a bit on the bottom there which does say the bit about implementation, collaboration, service, and information monitoring. So we don't, from what Duncan's saying here, have we got actually, it says there, monitoring and reporting to leadership team and cabinet council, and there's a whole section. Do we actually have a consistent monitoring thing that goes back into that process?
We haven't had anything to report back yet, Chair, through this process.
Yeah.
So, but I have systems ready to go when it comes to...
What about previous years?
No, we haven't got anything for previous years.
Thank you. Anybody else on this one? Okay.
Chair, if we may then, do we need at this stage to move from theme 1, because it's not practical, to theme 2 and get on with the discussion on that?
Thank you for your suggestion, Ron.
Thank you, Chair.
Veronica.
I'll kick off. And perhaps we could have responses from everyone, although some of you already contributed to this actually already. So what monitoring and reporting arrangements do you have in place for your current collaborative arrangements? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Currently, as I just mentioned a second ago, we haven't had anything to put through. We have the guidance and templates ready to go to help us with the monitoring, but they will all come through our service area within PSSU. That will then get directly reported back into the leadership team and back in through this process, because we report this annually back to joint scrutiny. So every year you will get a report on our collaborative arrangements. But the monitoring from service areas will come into our system, and we will have the systems in place.
Anybody want to come back on that one? Thank you. Anybody want to do the next question?
Well, I would just say within the actual service areas, we do have monitoring arrangements for all of the collaborations that we're involved in. I guess what we haven't got is uniformity across the service areas, and that's what's coming out clearly today, isn't it? But we do, certainly for any of MIST, the Joint Adoption Service, we've got a number of performance indicators that we look at. They look at the money spent, etc., etc. So they're all done very regularly, but I think what isn't happening is that we're not sort of collating it across the council.
Could you give an answer from each area? Sorry.
Oh, I know Councillor Cameron wants to come in on this as well, but from what you're saying, in effect, and also from the report that we had when we were starting to look at the back, we found no uniformity in terms of the reports, and some of them were very lengthy with no statistical information at all. Others were brief but were full of statistical information, which was extremely helpful. Somewhere we need to get some consistency, because we as members want to be able to understand what's going on, and facts and figures often speak louder than words.
Thank you. Well, yes, I think that is what we're trying to get at. The words in there might be lots of words, but they're saying things like good progress is being made. Who's the judge of whether good progress is being made, and what are the facts that back that up?
Right. Thank you there, Councillor Cameron. Can I have officer's response to that one, please?
Again, in education, the services that we have, all of the services have a service level agreement. Within that service level agreement, there are agreed outcome measures. Some of those will be throughput. So for some of the services that deliver directly to children or to schools, then clearly there'll be volume in the type of work described, but also then the outcomes for those children as well. So we tend to have a termly review process and then an annual report. Clearly, Council now also has information from the EAS about progress towards targets in schools, and that maps on then to our performance management system within education. So each of those plans is tracked through one of the senior management team's work plans for their team, and those are also reviewed separately as part of a termly review process. So in terms of what we've completed for this exercise, this doesn't reflect what's actually in the annual return. So I think having clarity about what information members want, but given the nature of the services of some of the collaborative enterprises, because again they'll be quite different, I think would be really helpful. Bearing in mind we wouldn't want to either overwhelm you with quite lengthy reports. So I think it would be useful to have a further discussion about exactly what sort of information you'd find helpful so we can target that for you appropriately.
Anybody else?
Only, I think, just to reiterate the point before, I think the data that you've got on the ESF projects is because that is how we are expected to report to WEFO. They are the targets, and they are where we are to target. Sometimes it can be tricky sometimes if we get requested for information that's for a specific financial year, because ESF operations work cumulatively across the life of the project. And as you can imagine, when you engage someone in a particular period of time, they may gain a job, you may record that as a job outcome. Later on, they may unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond their control, lose jobs. So sometimes having the statistics is fine, having an understanding of the statistics, and also, I'm talking about ESF being cumulative, other operations, other projects, collaborations, could be on academic year basis, could be financial year basis. So it's really important that there's clarity on the data, otherwise you can start comparing things and thinking, oh, why has that number gone up or down or whatever. So I think it's a big ask in some ways for everybody to bring something together in one way and have it reporting, because there is such a diverse nature of all the collaborations. Some lend themselves much more easily to that data than perhaps some others do.
Thank you, Karen. Lyndon? It's very well too, very well. Members? Right. Somebody do the next question, please. That's number 2.
Given that the lack of quantitative data provided, are all your collaborative projects clearly identified and monitored in your service plans and through the Council's fund and performance management system?
I'm going to say yes, Councillor Morby, to that for mine.
I think I've already said yes for education already. So.
I could fill all of the points you've put there on all the schemes that have been set out. We would formally go on default if there was an issue or a problem. We would pick up, but where you've got contracts and what have you that are operating, you do tend to work on that default position if something goes wrong. So not at the moment, no, not for every project in there. Some of them, yes, not all.
Anybody want to come back on that, Nigel?
I was interested in that bit about contracts, saying about the contract, about the nature of the contracts that you have with organisations with whom you're in collaboration. Would it be in order for us to say to our partners, what are your systems for compliance and so forth? Could that be a part of the actual collaboration contract to say to our partners, what are your systems, and do they meet, and could it be possible that they even have better systems than we are, and we could learn from them? Merely thinking aloud that it could be part of the initial agreement. How are our partners set up to perform, and what their systems are of compliance and so forth.
Anybody want to reply to that one?
I would assume that in any contract or in any service level agreement that the partnership come together and look at what their mutual needs are, and part of that should be monitoring and impact analysis. So my assumption would have to be that in the contracts we currently have, people are already compliant, because that's their responsibility to their own governance arrangements to make sure that they are. I think there's a wider point about can we share a greater understanding across our partnerships about how we can maybe form some of these standards together, and are there other issues that we can learn on from partners. I would certainly, from education's viewpoint, we try to get the highest common denominator when we look at governance and performance management systems. So we do have those discussions as an education group. But I would have to say, in terms of that, if your particular question, people should already be ensuring themselves that they're compliant. That would have to be our assumption going into those discussions.
Thank you there.
Well, just to say, is that if you don't think that somebody's standards are high enough, is it, would it be something to say, well, we don't think your standards are high enough, either improve them or we don't collaborate?
On the point of European funding, there's a legal, an SLA amongst the partners. So on the projects where Torvine is the lead, Torvine has the contract with WEFO, there is an SLA with the other partners. So there is always a risk that WEFO could, for example, if there's underperformance and you don't reprofile and you've claimed more money, they could reclaim it back. So we would have, Torvine's legal team would have sat down with the other local authorities and the FE colleges and thrashed out an SLA to make sure that, yes, if an individual local authority or FE is not performing, the risk of that is held there. So there's a very tight legal contractual arrangement in that. Similarly, in projects where Torvine may be a partner in but not the lead, there is a similar relationship, and obviously we would be responsible purely for our element, and any risk of performance, whether that's less money in the future or actually a risk of clawback, would be held, and that again would be monitored through Work Smart's performance management team plans and through the Chief Officer.
Alan Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite apparent from comments that members are not clear on what measurements they have over a number of collaborative issues. Now, I know any form of collaboration doesn't always stand on its own in terms of the result. There are extraneous factors that come into play, the economy or whatever that may be, or other issues that come up post the collaboration. But surely at the very outset of collaboration, we should have a definite measure of what this is delivering before you go into that collaboration, and then you can measure at the end of each year what that is, rather than try and add a measure, look at a different measure, decide what they are, measure them, then everybody can see what you measured against then. And it's no good then saying, we would like this measure out of that measure. You've decided what it is, just go and do it. But it appears to me that a number of collaborations gone into without a definite measure being put in place, and that isn't necessarily always totally quantitative. It can be qualitative as well, but at least you're knowing what you're trying to get out from the outset and whether you've achieved that or not. Is that not possible as part of the collaborative framework to actually say, this is what we're getting out of it, and then measure?
Thank you, Chair. That's actually covered in the collaborative framework element under the detailed planning stage, or the various stages of the adopted collaboration framework that went through Cabinet. So your point is well made around that, and that is included within the developing collaboration framework should any projects come forward. So your point around identifying what the purpose is and how it's going to be monitored is covered within the collaboration framework there.
I think if you look at the collaborations, and I've looked at mine now in terms of the questions you're asking, and they range from definite sort of contractual arrangements where there will be something in place to guide it, right through to we'll share a quantity surveyor because we haven't got one at the moment. So you're not going to get a measure for all of that. I think what you're hitting at is the key collaborations where there are outcomes for our citizens that ought to be measured, and that may not always be the case. An informal arrangement across Gwent, as it was, as it will be, across Gwent, where we ring up because we haven't got a particular skill, and that skill's brought in. I'm pretty sure you probably don't want us to measure that. But if we've got a contract that says X happens, then you do. So I think you have to be very careful of applying the same rules to all of the things you've got in your documentation here, because they're all, they fall into groups. And it's a certain group, I think, you're talking about, rather than all.
Okay. Councillor Reeves.
The Minister for Public Services is due to make an announcement shortly around the shape of local government in the future. I'm looking at the table here and I'm seeing 6 senior officers of the councils whose salary is probably worth over £500,000 a year collectively, and so I consider you to be experts, and I want to say you're worth every penny and probably more. So would you like to take this opportunity to offer some advice to the Minister around whether we should accelerate the process to make collaboration more possible in the future?
We normally charge for our...
Chair, can I just add, really thank you for the compliment to all of us, and we'll always accept those. I don't think it's officer's place to give advice to the Minister then.
Thank you. Any more members? Hopefully not like that. Thank you. Right. The next question down. Who wants to go at that one?
If I come in there, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Seaburn.
Seaburn? And him, yeah. How confident are officers that new collaboration are delivering real benefits to citizens and or the council? And how can we go out and explain what is happening to our citizens?
I think,
oh, sorry.
I think I answered that to a degree, that the levels of collaboration are very different, and there are probably maybe an exercise here, I don't know, Lyndon, in identifying those that are crucial in terms of that, the question you ask, and those that are just day-to-day things that we do because we're in local government and we share things. And, I don't think, measuring up, phoning up for information on, or assistance, which you always get from your fellows if they've got it, against sort of contractual arrangements, etc., etc. So I think it's a question of looking through and seeing what you want that to apply to. And then that would lead, I think, to an answer to your question in terms of telling people what collaboration is doing.
Next, thank you.
I was just going to say, in answer to that question, we can demonstrate, the numbers of people that have gone into employment, the numbers of qualifications that have been achieved as a result of having European funding. Members will be aware of the dramatic improvement we made in our needs statistics, going from, fourth worst in Wales or second worst in Wales to towards the top, and a significant reduction in that. And through all of that, we had the help of European funding. So Yes, we can. It's a nightmare when you're dealing with European funding, and the monitoring is very close, and we're in a period now where we're seeking further European funding. But yes, I can be confident that when we do get it, that it is put to good use, and we've developed, and so have other authorities and colleges, skilled, experienced staff teams who, unfortunately, due to gap in funding, some people have already lost, some organisations, and with this council, council has been kind enough to underwrite some salaries, but we are in a position now where it's becoming very vulnerable as time goes on.
Thank you. Anybody else? Right. Next question. Who wants that one? Jessica?
Yeah, these are the big ones now. What is the potential impact of those collaborative activities that have ceased or will cease? And do we think, given the reluctance on partners to go into other collaborations, are we seeing more risk going forward in an attempt to try and, find an alternative arrangement?
Just a few statistics to give you an idea. If we take staffing, which is easy for people to understand, I suppose, there are potentially 7, 9, 16, 20, roughly 26 staff potentially at risk of redundancy. And Jonathan can correct me if I get any of the figures wrong. There's potentially, and this is a worst case scenario because obviously redundancy figures are personal to each individual to calculate, but we're looking in the region, a worst case scenario could be about 174,000 redundancy billed to the council. In relation to achievements that have been made over the period of time, it's been a typical thing that we have had sort of around about 1,400 people participating in something like Bridges into Work in a year in Torvine. As I've said, we reduced the NEETs figure from in the region of 7% down to the current 2.2%. So the numbers of young people who would be affected, because in all of this there are numbers of young people that are up to 16 to 24 age range, and there are also, obviously it goes up to the working age of sort of 60, 65, depending on individuals participating. So I'm going back to, I know there's some statistics in the pack that you've got. The impact is very significant for us as an authority, which whilst we are improving, we still have low levels of post-16 qualifications, particularly in our adult field, and we still have a lot of young people coming through our risk register of being at NEET. So it's quite a large quantum to work with. We've currently got the staff team to work with them, but if we lose that, the difficulty is there's quite a large quantum at risk, and it's narrowing that down because we managed to narrow it down to very small numbers. There were only 27 young people at the point of destination from year 11 who were NEET last year, which was a percentage of 2.2. So, I don't want to keep reciting figures, but from the employability and qualifications and NEET's agenda, it is a serious impact. Further delays, and Jonathan and I have got a meeting with WEFO tomorrow because we were anticipating things would have moved at a greater pace, as WEFO were keen some months ago and now seem to have taken that keenness away, I think, when some of the Welsh Government run operations have already been put forward and advertised as good news stories.
Thank you. Anybody else on that one? Lyndon?
The other two collaborations that ceased was the delivery of the environmental enforcement service that stopped. That was a project that stopped, so we're expecting that there will be more litter and other environmental factors that's associated with that, but it's a simple case of the organisation not being able to afford to carry on with that service. And the second collaboration that ceased was the collaboration of the Trading Standards Service across Gwent, and again that was it's another fiscal matter that stopped that moving forward, which means that we will continue to have not ad hoc but different services across the different areas instead of having one combined service, which was the intent. So there are, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, a lot of these collaborations that are deemed to have been working well or certainly moving in a positive direction, they are all at risk because of a certain difficult funding, whether that's European or whether it's our own internal funding, has an impact on delivery.
Anybody else on that? Right. Next question. Can somebody have a go at that one? Norma?
Officers have touched on this all the way through, really, but taking into account budget pressures, why have we not seen a greater increase in the number of collaborative activities entered into?
I don't know whether I'm actually going to provide you with any different answer than what we mentioned earlier, really. But there's a number of different impacts, and I'm sure that some of it's around the uncertainty around what's happening or what announcement we may or may not have next month, and also the financial pressures around different organisations. People tend to get in an air of uncertainty, they tend to become more closely knitted to their own budget and trying to protect services back at home rather than looking at the wider arrangements. But that's just a personal view.
Any more on that, Nigel?
Yes. A couple of weeks ago when we had the policy seminar, one of the things that was mentioned with the local service boards was the problem of compatibility of certain systems, particularly with regard to IT, and also that some of the setting up of partnerships is that because of different systems in different places, that there's no compatibility. How much of a problem is that in the setting up of partnerships that based on that? On the face of it, they say it will save money, but the thing is that there has to be a lot of upfront work before we actually get to the savings of money, and whether the savings of money will be enough to pay for the upfront work that we have to get it done in the first place.
I mean, I think IT infrastructure is a thing that dogs us across the piece, not only between authorities, but sometimes within authorities. So, social care system talking to education systems, school systems actually linking up in the same network or not. We're still doing some work around that. So I think that there are some structural issues. But before that, there has to be a willingness to actually collaborate and see a joint need. The discussion so far is obviously focused on what officers are doing, but one of the things I think it's fair for me to reflect back is also it needs political willingness to actually do that too. So, one of the things that I've certainly encountered in discussions with colleagues in other authorities is officers might see that there may be some benefit, but clearly that there's also a political process to be gone through to make sure that is seen as a solution that everyone's comfortable with. So I think it's not just the officer-led bit or the infrastructure bit, it's clearly an issue for everyone in the system as well, and I think we probably sometimes come across some barriers at each of those points. So it's probably a collaborative an issue for everyone involved in the system. But IT clearly is something that SRS aren't here, so I'm not going to comment on SRS, but I don't think it's just about SRS. We've said, I'll give an example where we were doing some work in Cambran at Lantarn Business Park on a site that's hosted by Caerphilly for the Visual Impairment Service. But we'll also have the Communication Intervention Team, which we administer, and the Hearing Impairment Team, which we also administer. We've come together on that same premises. And it's taken us a year to get the Caerphilly and Torvine infrastructure in the same box on the same site. So that's taken up a huge amount of time. So I think there's a real point there. But the thing that made the difference and made sure we got through to a good solution was that both Caerphilly and ourselves were really determined to make sure it did work. So I think that willingness, chief officer level, political level, and also then trying to get some of the technical solutions all have to come together.
Thank you there. Any more on that one? Any more questions on that one? Right. I've been reminded that we've got the additional information, the one with the red amber and green on it. Do members have any questions they want to ask on that specifically? As you've got that piece of information, and it's more concise, there's probably bits you might want to pick out of that for, as we've got the officers here. Anything in that you want to ask that jumps out at you? I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. Any general questions you would like to, because we're hopefully, towards the feel at the end of this scrutiny that you think you would like to ask that you haven't asked. Nigel, you've got something there?
Just for clarification, what's the difference between the collaboration on trading standard service, which has been ceased, and the collaboration on trading standards, which is now in the yellow service? What's the difference between the two services? Which one is what's what and which is which? Can I just ask?
Right, I think it's mentioned that there is a nationwide collaboration, and it's been amalgamated with the same one that covers the lack of success in bringing together a Gwent trading standards unit. So basically, in terms of the nationwide collaboration, that's ongoing, that's continuing, that's largely successful. There are a few little glitches in there that are brought out in the in terms of the Gwent trading standards, that hasn't proceeded for a number of reasons. We're looking at the moment, we're talking to Blaenau Gwent about whether we collaborate with them, and it looks almost certain that we will be looking at drawing the two services together and providing across the trading standard service across the two authorities. I think it's a great pity the Gwent trading standards one didn't go ahead. But there are reasons behind that, not lying with Torvine, and I think it's probably best I don't talk about those here.
Thank you there. Is that okay, Nigel? Thank you. Anybody got anything else they want to say? Otherwise, I invite the officers, starting with Duncan and ending up with Lyndon, who's going to summarize. He can finish where he started, if that's okay with you, I'm sure. If you'd like to just do a few summary points on reflection on this afternoon's scrutiny, please. You right, Duncan, with that? Thank you.
I wasn't expecting this, so I think I've said everything I want to say, really. I mean, I don't think there's inertia because of the local government reorganisation, but I think it does slow things down somewhat, and there's a reluctance. I think the levels of collaboration, members, maybe if we do this again, there's light touch going on to heavy contract, I suppose, if you'd like to use those words. And, it's probably the heavy contract side that you're interested in rather than the light touch. And maybe it could be focused around that in future rather than across the piece here, which tends to lose probably the important things. But there we are.
Broadly agree with what Duncan said. I don't think there is inertia. As I said, there's been a couple of projects we've tried to get off the ground in terms of a training consortium and something around complaints. But undoubtedly there is a reluctance from some officers in some councils to do anything, to get into real detailed work which takes a lot of time and effort when they think it could all be thrown up in the air. And I think that's a real shame. And again, I think you've also, like Duncan saying, we see these collaborations on a continuum. Some of them are very small and some are large. Some were opportune when grant monies were made available and we were able to do. That's dried up. I mean, that just isn't happening now. So, perhaps the one that springs to mind, the work that we did with education and colleagues in health on MIST, the chances of doing something like that now would be, just wouldn't exist. I think, we're putting an awful lot of effort into maintaining what we've got rather than looking at new things. That's not to say that we're not looking at new collaborations, because where they can bring savings and add value, we continue to look at them. But it's not the environment it once was.
I think from my point of view, it's been a really helpful discussion to try and just clarify everyone's expectations about accountability, really, because I think that's the discussion we've had this afternoon. So I think we'll need to go back and reflect on exactly what members have said today in terms of what information we provide you with on a regular basis that shows impact for all the energy and effort and funding that's going in across those collaborative services, albeit with a caveat that they're very different by nature. But we need to have a framework whereby you've got confidence that the work we're doing is meaningful and is making a difference. And that clearly, there's been a clear message that I've heard, at least, that that's not just going forward, that's about what we currently have as well. So I think we need to reflect on that and probably come back and say, well, and offer a solution, because I don't think we've given you what you've asked for.
Yes, I'd only like to add that in the world that I'm working in at the moment, which is the European funding world, the issue for us is really getting WEFO to move at pace. And if any of you have any influence, I'm going to make a plea, because we can strongly evidence, that the money that we've received, the outcomes that we have produced for Torvine, but also with our partners across the region, there is very clear evidence of what the difference that has made to people's lives. And also then, by virtue of that, we're helping to support people in an economic way and helping to support regions economically. If people are working and getting qualifications and able to get better employment, it's all good for the region. So, yeah, mine would be, if I may beg your indulgence, a plea that if you have any influence with WEFO, that you could bring that to bear. In all seriousness, Jonathan and I are meeting with WEFO officers tomorrow, and following that I'll be preparing a note for Dave Congreve and for Councillor Hunt on the impact of some of the delays, because we did think the place we would have reached would have been by now. So, more will follow via Councillor Hunt afterwards.
Just a couple of quick points on me. Firstly, thank you for listening to us this afternoon and for taking note of the presentation, for your questions. I found it very helpful for me, as it sits within our service area, and we have to provide this to you on an annual basis, and knowing what you want from us is very helpful to me. A couple of things that come very clear back to me is that the current pro formas are not working, and I need to go back and reshape those. I would like to pick up on both Duncan, Keith's and Dermot's point around there are different types of collaboration, and when we look at the collaboration in the way in which the framework is written, a number of the collaborations in the document you have today wouldn't have reached that threshold. It would be called a project, and we'd be project managing that in-house and within team plans. So there's an opportunity for me to go back, maybe reshape this, liaise with my colleagues up on the top desk there to ensure that next year's report is more reflective of the type of information that you want, that it contains more data-rich information for you to make some comparisons and some other thoughts that you would like us to take back. Secondly, the original collaboration framework is established as a council-owned document to ensure that we are using our resources, and both staff and financial, in an adequate way. But I do take the point that both councillors have made around how would this work on a regional basis, and I will be taking this, our existing collaboration framework, and I'll be contacting my counterparts in the various different boroughs to see how they do this, if they have a collaboration framework, and how we could possibly work better together, because if we do collaborate anyway, having one framework is a lot easier than having two. So that's the sort of points I've taken back today. I'll also get feedback from the Chair and Rebecca on your points of view following, and ensure that next year's report is something that you will be more satisfied with.
Thank you very much indeed, officers. You're released, as it were. Thank you very much. And over to members now. Look relieved. It's the questions bit now. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay. Are you in or out? Okay. It's now time for formulate questions and any recommendations time. Has anybody got some? Norma?
Well, I think we ought to really flag up the fact that the Williams review is a barrier at this moment in time. Because of the uncertainty of it, I think that's a really big factor. You know, how can they work towards things when they have this uncertainty of the future?
Thank you very much. Any more? Stuart?
Thank you, Chair. We've all heard what the officer said today, and willingness really to work with other authorities because of the uncertainty going forward. We all accept that. But is there an opportunity to work with other partners out there, the third sector and other people? Is there an opportunity to bring other people on board in the short term?
Thank you for that. Any more? Nigel?
Getting back to the point that I made, that I think just about everyone made, was the intake of breath when we heard that the collaboration framework was in fact about future collaborations and was not going to be used to have a look at present collaborations. That it was not which was the impression that I think a few of us were under, that they were going to say that because of the audit office report saying that there didn't seem to be any good way of measuring, and this collaboration framework was that, but it wasn't being used for existing projects to see, because we might even discover that under the new framework, the existing projects weren't as good as people thought they were. Maybe that's just a thing, but I must be honest, I was shocked when I heard that.
You actually had two in there, didn't you? Because you've got the measures and you've got the framework. Do you want to put yours in now? Yep.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with any of the suggestions made so far, and I think we ought to come back to them at the end of the discussion before we decide what we do put forward. I do think that we should be recommending that the Cabinet be made aware that the collaboration framework hasn't actually been pursued with any great enthusiasm so far, or words to that effect, for the reasons which were given by the chief officers, and I think by and large they were pretty sound reasons that you do need partners to work with. And their understanding was perhaps different, as Nigel has indicated, to the understanding we had, looking at it in retrospect. But this may be a question of poor communication. You know, there's more than one officer being involved in overseeing this, and maybe that has been a problem as well. But I think we ought to be saying that when we're looking at collaborative arrangements in principle, we ought to be endorsing the eventual acceptance by Linden that you find out your potential partners' views about collaboration before you finalise your framework, because you may put in your framework something which rules out collaboration with that other authority or public body or voluntary organisation. I disagree, if I can, whilst I've got the floor, disagree with what Stuart was saying about flagging up that you can collaborate with the voluntary sector. Again, it may be from my own experience, but I know that there is a considerable amount of collaboration with the voluntary sector undertaken within Torfaen, as far as that is possible. Don't forget we're statutory authority, but we do engage with the voluntary sector quite significantly in social service and indeed in education. So I'm not sure that I would make that a particular recommendation at this stage. We could endorse the idea that you can collaborate with the voluntary sector and other bodies, but I wouldn't like it to be put in such a way that we are criticising for the failure to do that, because I'm pretty sure that they do that as far as they can. Very often voluntary sector organisations don't want to be in a collaborative as such with a local authority because they feel that might make them more susceptible, I suppose, to the sort of disdain which local authorities are sometimes held in by members of the public because, we don't always do what they want us to do. And the voluntary sector likes its independence in that respect. That's what I'm suggesting as part of our recommendations.
Chair?
Thank you.
Sorry. I think it might be a good idea to actually find out what other projects the other authorities are taking forward. The fact that we're not currently collaborating at the moment, but we are doing our own projects, and so I find it difficult to believe that the other authorities aren't taking any projects forward. So part of me is saying, well, what are the other authorities doing at the moment in regarding future projects, with a view of if there's any connection or synergy, maybe we can again get together at a later date.
Thank you there. Veronica?
We've all had an email today about the possibility of a cities collaboration on regional basis, which will be much bigger than the collaborations that have been done recently. To compare that with what has taken place perhaps with the Greater Gwent may well be something that is going to be on the horizon for officers anyway.
Any more?
Yeah, can I just question, have we all had that email? Yeah. All members?
Well, all important members.
Okay, could we...
just so that people know, it may be an email to Labour members.
Yeah.
So don't go searching for something...
Could I ask Rebecca to just put her observations in frame as well, just to see what she's come up with, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The only two I had were the ones that Lyndon summarised at the end with regards to the collaboration framework, looking at other local authorities and aligning our collaboration frameworks, and also with regards to the report, looking at alternative ways and better ways of reporting the data and outcomes to members. And perhaps rather than you receiving this long list of all the collaborative activities, just focus on ones where there have been major movements throughout the year.
One observation I want to make on what Brian said, and I think somebody else said here, isn't there a limit on our collaboration from what I was getting there? 500,000, wasn't it? There's a cash limit there. You can't, a formal collaboration, am I correct on that, Brian? I'm just asking you.
But the budget was to be something like 500,000, wasn't it?
So under that, it's not a collaboration, it's a partnership or some other animal.
I don't think that's the law. I think that's something we've adopted.
It's something whether this council does it or not.
Chair, sorry, was that collaboration framework meant to say you'll have to meet each one of these criteria or any one of them?
I honestly, it seemed to be something that Cabinet and the officers...
One or more.
One or more.
Therefore, the 500,000 might not come into it then, because it could be, I forget what that last one was now, but it was a pretty general last one in terms of improvement. I can't quite recall what it was.
That's an interesting observation, thank you. Where do you want to go with these? Which of these would you like to adopt? It's your shout.
Well, you need to read them out again, don't you?
Can we read them, Rebecca? You've got them all down there now, haven't you?
So that corporately we look at the collaboration frameworks of other local authorities.
That seems popular. Anybody against? No, good.
That we look at the data and outcomes that are reported to members, and also the collaborative activities in general that are reported to you. And Councillor Morby mentioned that Cabinet are made aware that the collaboration framework hasn't been used, and for the reasons set out by the officers today.
Everybody into that one?
Yeah, and that when looking at collaborative activities, we should find out views from potential partners as to our collaborative framework and how it applies.
All very sensible, this, isn't it?
Can we just, in homage to what Stuart suggested about the voluntary sector, include the term voluntary sector in that last one?
Endorsing collaborative activities with the third sector, particularly voluntary.
And not for profit, isn't it? He likes them, doesn't he? They can get all the lottery money. Anything else anybody wants to put in there that we've missed out? What about this regional thing you brought up, Brian?
Well, I don't think we should talk about it. I think some of us have had an email which we will talk about in the appropriate place.
Okay, thank you. Everybody happy with that? Great, lovely. Thank you. That's an interesting outcome. Right, the next item on the agenda is the date of next meeting. Sorry, 15th of July, and the subject?
Forward-facing plan.
Annual performance plan, and I'm not chairing, thankfully. What's that?